Brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
Hey Hoopheads, wanted to take a minute to shout out our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. We've had their partnership manager and training specialist Jefferson Mason and marketing manager Nick Bartlett on the show in the past, and we couldn't be more excited about what they're doing for the game of basketball. Their Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market, and truly accelerate skill development faster than ever. Beyond efficient reps, Dr. Dish provides training expertise and versatility designed to develop complete players. The new Dr. Dish CT machine has further revolutionized basketball training with over 150 plus on-demand individual and team workouts from some of the best coaches and trainers in the game. These workouts include video instruction and combine game-like shooting drills with ball handling, conditioning, and agility drills. Along with workouts, the Dr. Dish training management system also provides stat tracking and analytics to track progress and ensure accountability. These are just a few reasons why top programs like Duke, North Carolina, Louisville, Florida, Baylor, and countless others are upgrading to Dr. Dish. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com. Follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And make sure you mention the Hoopheads podcast to get $300 off your next Dr. Dish purchase. That's a great deal, Hoopheads. Get out and get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
Here's the difference between me and whether you call me a trainer or player development. I'm a coach at heart. I think I'm a coach, but I think some people are really, really trying to build a brand and build a business where I'm just trying to help people, build people and build careers. That's what I want to get to. If I could help build people and build careers, I'm going to be able to look myself in the mirror and be happy with the results that we get.
Phil Beckner is a player development coach and consultant for numerous NBA players, as well as several different college basketball programs. He works with players, teams, and organizations to enhance performance and maximize results. Phil has instructed and led elite-level players, as well as high-level teams and organizations in creating a blueprint for development and strategies to enhance leadership skills. Beckner spent the previous 2 seasons at Boise State, where he served as an assistant and then associate head coach. While at Boise State, Phil was part of 2 consecutive 20-win seasons, 2 NIT appearances, and he was instrumental in the development of 2018 NBA first-round draft pick Chandler Hutchinson, who went number 22 to the Chicago Bulls. Phil was a collegiate coach for 10 seasons, plus 1 year as an assistant coach at the professional level. Before arriving at Boise State, he spent 1 season at Nebraska and 1 season on staff with the Oklahoma City Blue, the NBA D-League affiliate of the Oklahoma City Thunder. Before joining Oklahoma City, Beckner spent 7 seasons at Weber State, helping the Wildcats to 6 consecutive postseason appearances. He served as the program's director of basketball operations for 2 years, before being elevated to assistant coach for 5 seasons. Beckner was primarily responsible for the defensive plays, as Weber State won a trio of Big Sky titles during his tenure at the school. Phil worked closely with NBA All-Star Damian Lillard during his time at Weber State. Beckner began his coaching career at the high school level while also teaching physical education at Buckeye High School. He was a part of the staff that won the Arizona State title in 2006. As a player, Phil was a 4-year letter winner at Kansas Wesleyan University in Salina, Kansas, where he earned his bachelor's degree in physical education in 2005. If you're enjoying the Hoopheads pod, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends in the coaching community about the show, and make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. Check out hoopheadspod.com, where you can listen to every episode we've ever recorded and find out more about the mission that drives our show. Grab a pen and paper right now so you can take some notes as you listen to this episode with player development coach Phil Beckner. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel. And tonight we are pleased to welcome to the podcast Phil Beckner, player development coach. Phil, welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys.
We are excited to have you on tonight. We've been kind of chasing back and forth for a little bit of time, trying to find a time that worked for both of us. So glad to finally get you on and talk some hoops with you. So let's start out by going back in time to when you were a kid. Talk a little bit about how you got into the game and what the game meant to you when you were younger.
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually grew up in a really small town, so in Arizona, there wasn't a ton of stuff to do, and I kind of remember my first main basketball experiences being in junior high. Playing in PE, playing, for like the junior high teams. We had a seventh grade team, then we had an eighth grade team, and really just kind of fell in love with the game back then. I grew up, a huge Phoenix Suns fan, watching those guys all the time, and then went to basketball camps in the summer, which is kind of unheard of nowadays with all the AAU stuff and the elite camps and all that. But these were true like all day full basketball camps where you get up and go from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. and just kind of fell in love with it that way. Was a huge fan of the game, the NBA, the players, and just love getting out of the house and love getting to go play basketball.
Who was your guy when you were growing up? Who was your NBA guy?
Oh man, nowadays my favorite player, and this wasn't growing up, but I'm a huge, huge, huge Steve Nash fan. Like I constantly actually get made fun of it about it from a lot of people, but I love Steve Nash. But growing up, like Dan Marley a lot for the Suns, liked Charles Barkley, Jason Kidd. Always was a big Phoenix Suns guy.
Nice. Yeah, Marley was, when he was at his peak for those couple years, he was just such a unique player.
Yeah.
The way that he, as physical as he was, and he could shoot it and get to the rim, and I have an affinity for him. He was a little bit before me, but I played at Kent and he played at Central Michigan.
Okay. Yeah.
And so his brother Jeff was there for I want to say a year or two while I was at Kent. So anybody who was from the MAC, I tended to watch and to keep an eye on. Even now, I look for guys that come out of the MAC and make it to the league. So whenever you have a kind of that personal connection, so I always liked Marley as well.
For sure, yeah, one of all-time tough guys, I think.
No question, yeah, no doubt about that. So when you think back to your time as a kid, and then you think about, you mentioned the fact that now we have this AAU system that's in place that pretty much from the time a kid is 7 or 8 years old, you kind of get funneled into that system. And then depending upon where your level is, you end up doing more or less traveling. And a lot of those fundamental camps, like you described, have kind of disappeared. And it's kind of been a theme on our show, and just curious to get your take on it, is the fact that a lot of playground / pickup basketball has basically disappeared. Now there's still maybe pockets of places that you can find a court where there's maybe some good games and some high level players, but for the most part, junior high school players, college players have been funneled into this indoor game, and you just don't see guys playing outside. So what was your experience like growing up in the game? Were you able to, obviously it's a little hot in Arizona in the summertime to be, playing out on the asphalt courts, but just talk a little bit about how you went about playing and improving yourself as you went from season to season. What was your basketball experience like in the off season?
Yeah, we growing up, and it's one of those stories you start aging yourself a little bit. I'm not too old, but I turned 37 this Saturday coming up. But growing up, I was an outdoor court guy out in Buckeye, Arizona, and whether it was hot or not, really the only gym we had during the summer was the summer rec program up at the high school, and that was only open certain hours. But literally, like, we'd get out of school, and I lived right across the street from the elementary school, and those were probably the best concrete courts. They had the best rims. We actually played with chain nets sometimes. And then there was one other court out in Buckeye, and it was by the Little League fields. And if you wanted to play at night, and I know this is like sounding like one of those stories where, we used to walk uphill, to school,
right.
Snowing both way, all that. But if you wanted to play at night, you had to go play when there were Little League games, because that's when the lights were on. Kind of like, the old
That's awesome.
Sandlot story.
That's
they
awesome.
play with the fireworks. But if like Little League was playing, there was enough light on the courts. And so we just lived out there. We played all the time. It wasn't necessarily a great wealthy community, all the time out there. So, I mean, it was, there was no race, there was no color, it was everybody kind of against everyone. And you really grew up playing on the outside courts all day. And I think obviously kids miss that, what you figure out. And I think what we all learn from, and it's not like I'm getting on a soapbox here, having been a coach and a player and, whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, it's just like, there's so many life lessons. There's so many real experiences where like, you'll really see a fist fight sometimes.
Right.
It's
yeah,
like,
absolutely.
are you going to jump in the the fight, or are you going to go the other way? You're really going to have to like walk back all the way home because your buddy left you and you didn't get a ride. Now you got to walk through the dark, and get there all the way. Or, the one I love, my junior high basketball coach, he played basketball at New Mexico State. He was my seventh grade coach, and he always got on me about being a good player. He thought I could be a pretty good player, and he just said, "Hey, whenever I want to see you, you got to be dribbling a ball and dribbling it in your weak hand." And I remember one time I walked down to the Pop Warner football fields, or football games going on. I didn't have a ball with me, and he looked at me with like the biggest look of disappointment. I mean, 6'8" dude, strong, played at New Mexico State, and he was just like, "Where's your ball?" And I'm like, "Well, it's Saturday." And he's like, "No, you should be dribbling." Then you hear all the Nash stories, how Nash got his left hand so good. And so there were times, just the excitement of walking to the park and dribbling the ball and your moves, and you're in this own world. And now, kids are just so swamped by social media, parents, AAU coaches, handlers, just all this stuff. I just think there's way more freedom to the game back then. Freedom to grow as a person, freedom to just figure out stuff on your own, and, freedom to grow as a player. And obviously that's not always happening in today's game.
Yeah, I love what you said from two standpoints. One, the freedom for you as a player to be able to grow and to get better. And then number two, the fact that you talk about growing as a person. And I think that both of those things, when I think back to my experiences on the playground, what I always go back to is the fact that kids today don't get an opportunity to play against kids or adults who are not their age. And I think when you're a kid, from the time you're 7 years old now, you're slotted into, okay, you're on the second grade team. And so you play against second graders, and the next year you play against third, and the next year you play against fourth. And you never get an opportunity to play against somebody who's a little bit bigger, a little bit tougher, a little bit older than you. And you never get the opportunity, to your point about becoming a better person, you never get an opportunity to be mentored by some of those adults or older players. Like I think about when I went to the courts and I was 14 or 15 years old. And so maybe I was in 7th, 8th grade. And here's this skinny little kid who comes up to the courts, and there was always that one guy, whether it was an adult or just an older high school player, college player, who would kind of take you under their wing and say, "Hey, let's get Mike in the game. He's pretty good." And maybe I couldn't get into the main event game when the court was packed with 60 guys, but if I was there first, somebody had picked me for that first set of games. And then you got to figure out how to use your body, and you learn all those little tricks of the trade. And those are things that guys who maybe are 25 years old, and maybe they're not super great basketball players, but they're certainly bigger and more physical than you are when you're 14 or 15 years old. And I think that's something that kids do miss. And I think that's something that, as a coach or a player development, trainer, I think that you got to be able to figure out, how do I get kids to incorporate some of those little tricks of the trade? How do I teach them to do those things, which are some of the things that maybe kids in the past learned to do more naturally? And yet at the same time, I feel like today's system, kids today overall are far more skilled. Like if you look at the number of kids who can shoot threes or can handle the ball, it's way higher than it was 15 or 20 years ago, because there's so many more opportunities and so many more coaches that are out there teaching kids and trying to help them get better. So it's interesting. There's pluses and minuses to both systems for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
So if you look back on your time as you're growing up, and you're obviously playing on the playground, you're having those great experiences, and you get into high school, what's one or two of your favorite memories from playing high school basketball there in Arizona? What are some things when you think about your high school career that really stick out for you?
Yeah, going back to high school and just kind of how, times were back then. We didn't have social media. We didn't have, writers at every game and videos at every game and whatnot. So the biggest thing looking back on high school is just like how clueless I was. Like I really thought like, man, I could go play Division I and be an NBA player. And I had no freaking idea. I'm playing at 4A high school in Buckeye, Arizona, where
there you go.
We're barely a 500 team. And now, granted, I was first team all conference, got to score some points, whatever, but I had no clue what the heck was going on. So that always hits me about playing in high school. And just, the biggest thing growing up in a small town is a lot of those guys, same guys played every sport together. But the thing you remember most, and, not being too sentimental or too cliche here, but, just your teammates. A couple of the guys I played with, like, still stay in touch, till this day. And those are the things that end up being pretty special. You remember your career high. You remember maybe, a butt whooping you took every now and then. But, we weren't great. We weren't, very good. I think we finished third or fourth in conference. But just those guys you grew up with, you played multiple sports with, and then you're still friends to this day. It's pretty cool to look back on.
Yeah, there's nothing better than being able to reminisce with teammates, and especially like you said, growing up with the same guys who you played with in multiple sports, and you probably played with them since you were in third, fourth grade, and you're lifelong friends. And I know I can speak to that same thing, that, by the time I was in probably fourth or fifth grade, I already kind of knew who my teammates were going to be when I got to high school. And you look at and compare that to today in a lot of situations where guys are transferring and kids are at 3 or 4 different high schools, and you never know if the kid's going to go stay in their public school or they're going to go to a private school. And then if they're at the private school, if they're not happy, they're going somewhere else. Yeah. And it's just, what you used to see in college with guys transferring, that's unfortunately starting to trickle down into the, into the high school level. But I think you make a great point there about really what team sports and basketball is really good at is forging those bonds and connections between teammates. And there's nothing better than looking back on that. I think anybody who's played sports at any kind of level, I think, can relate to what you just said. The other thing you mentioned there was kind of your own unrealistic expectations of where you thought you could be. And I think that was probably pretty common in your era, and I'm a little bit older than you, so I'm going to turn 50 next March. So, talk about the lack of information and awareness. I certainly can vouch for that. And so when you went and you looked at, hey, I might want to play basketball beyond high school, at what point does the recruiting process start to happen where you're starting to realize that, hey, the letters from Duke and North Carolina and UCLA are not coming in, but I am getting some interest from some of these smaller, lower level schools? At what point does that start to happen? And then just maybe describe a little bit about how you ended up at Kansas Wesleyan and how that worked out for you.
Yeah, I think, something I'm really passionate about as a coach is, guys kind of, just going through the process of life, going through the process of their career, and, being able to battle some adversity, or, having to kind of wait a year for things to really, really click. And because of that, my story is pretty unique. I think almost all throughout my career, whether it was junior high, high school, college, even my coaching career, it was always kind of like I was in that year of waiting. Like my junior year of basketball, I wasn't confident enough in high school. I wasn't confident enough. I was kind of intimidated, this and that. Then the next year, I just finally get my ass in gear and get going and become a pretty good player. And throughout my coaching career, my playing career, that just happened over and over and over again. And so now as a coach, or a player development guy, like I don't have a lot of leeway for that. Like if someone's not willing to fight or someone's not willing to continue to show up. And that's kind of how I got recruited, because junior year I didn't do much. Started the first few games, kind of pissed that away and had to figure it out, look in the mirror. All these parents nowadays have an opinion and say stuff. And I remember one time I came home, I was crying in my bedroom, and my mom's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And there were kind of a couple guys on the team who were kind of bullying me maybe, or intimidating me. And, I just didn't have, the balls to sack up and be tough enough and be the player that I could have been. And she was like, I'm going to go talk to those guys. And I'm like, no chance. Like, not happening. And
let's cut that off now.
So throughout my career, I always kind of had to own some things and, and figure some things out, both as a player and then as a coach, which I know we'll talk about too. But so I didn't get recruited till my senior year. And then with the lack of media attention, all that stuff, my high school coach kind of had to help get my name out there, get me recruited. And that's back, like, we're sending emails and VHS tapes. And there are a lot of junior colleges recruiting me. There are a lot of NAI and kind of D2 schools recruiting me, and one of the schools had a little niche in Arizona, which was Kansas Wesleyan, and it was a good 4-year program. Seemed like they really wanted me. I visited, I liked it. I didn't want to try the 2-year deal. Was somewhat smart academically, so thought like, hey, what? Other Arizona guys have been successful there. I'm going to go there, and it ended up being a good experience. It was there are definitely some ups and downs at the college level, but being somewhat under recruited and then still having the opportunity to play at the next level, was something I would never trade or never give up.
So what do you remember from your freshman year in terms of your adjustment from high school basketball to college basketball? What was the biggest difference? What jumps out at you that was like, man, I wasn't ready for this, or this wasn't what I thought? Just give us just sort of your initial impressions.
Yeah, you know
when you
what,
walk
Mike,
on campus.
And I know where that could go basketball wise, but man, if in any of my college teammates who are now coaches or whatever, if they hear this, like they're going to go through the roof on this. But like our coach was nuts. Like I know him to this day. No. Like everyone says, like their coach is nuts. No, like literally crazy. He's the best man in the world. He'll take care of you. Old school. I mean, we did so much crazy stuff. We could talk about it for the next 45 minutes. We honestly could. But my first year, like as a freshman, I was the only freshman on the varsity team. They had a JV team too. And this coach thought I could be really good. He liked me. Again, I love him to death to this day. We still stay in touch, but he was absolutely nuts. So being the only freshman, he thought he had to be extra hard on me and push me, even though I was only playing 1 or 2 minutes a game. And that was probably the biggest adjustment. Like, trying to figure this guy, he was like 64, 65 years old at the time. He had coached, he'd won championships, great guy, but, going a little off the deep end at times and just being that freshman, he's like, hey, you're good, so I'm going to pick on you. I'm going to make it even harder for you. And that's something that was not easy. And again, going back to kind of my story is unique. It was always like I had to battle through some type of, adversity of something to get to that point. And it was just really so many times you're thinking about, this ain't the place for me, or I'm going to go somewhere else. And I don't know if I was just dumb, stubborn, hard-headed, or whatever it may be, but I kind of always stuck it out and, ended up having a pretty good experience because of it.
All right, so I'm not going to let you get away without giving us at least one crazy thing that he did, because I love hearing the crazy basketball stories, because I have a coach who I don't know if I'd classify him as crazy, but we did some crazy things. So you can give me your crazy story, and then I'll give you mine quick.
Okay, good. This is a good one. So our senior year, I stayed there 4 years. Our senior year, I thought we'd have a pretty good team. We ended up going 2-27. So we only won 2 games, and we won them both first semester. So we didn't win a game second semester. And we just had guys who couldn't catch the ball, who couldn't draw. I mean, they were like now, having coached at the Division I, like, God almighty, like there were some bad freaking players in the gym, and you didn't know that as much when you were a player, and
For sure.
I was a starter. But so we're going to start off practice. We're in Kansas. It's freezing already. It's late October, and our coach was super disciplined about everything, and he would always buy 1 ball for every player on the team. So if there are 15 guys on the team, there's 15 balls on the ball rack. If there's 14, there's 14 out there. It was just like his quirky little thing. So, we've had preseason workouts, and this is NAIA level. So they have those different leather balls. They're a little funky. No one could catch them for a week or two till they're broken in. Like, it's just I'm telling you, we could go all night. Like, this podcast would probably go, viral if they heard these stories.
Well, we might have to start a separate podcast. Crazy college basketball stories. That could be a break off. That'd be nice.
So we trot in there. We got our gear on. It's the first day of practice. 6 a.m. We're going twice a day. 6 a.m., 3 p.m. And I remember it like it's yesterday. We walk in there, lines us all up on the baseline. We got our shirts tucked in. We're ready to roll. And he's just standing at half court staring at us. And we're like, dear God, what did we do? Everyone's half scared of him anyways.
Right.
He's like, guys, we got 15 players out here. There's only 14 balls. I'm like, oh shit, like what is going? So he's like, who's got one? We're like looking around. We don't know, like we share the gym with other sports. Sometimes the PE classes, or anyone could have took a ball and used it or stole it or whatever. So he's like, I don't know. So he's like, you guys got to figure it out. So we huddle up. And no one has the ball, and swears like no one has the ball. So this one guy's like, you know what? I think I saw this football player in the dorms dribbling the ball, actually. We're like, no way. So we tell coach, we're like, we think a football player has it. So this is like 6 o'clock in the morning, 40 degrees in Kansas. And we're like, coach, we think so-and-so from the football team has it. He goes, well, go get it. So that kid starts to run out the gym who saw it. And he goes, no, everybody. So we're in our practice gear. Our gym's like 2 blocks. Dorms are like 2 blocks from the gym. Like we're literally running to the men's dorms. We're banging on this door, trying to wake some dude up. He opens the door, no ball. We're like, and literally like 15 of us are standing there in practice gear. We're like, good gosh, what are we going to do? So he's my best friend now. He's the best man in his wedding. Awesome dude. He's my roommate in college. He goes, all right, we'll all chip in money and we'll buy the basketball. I'll get a check. This is back, you wrote checks back then, like,
right.
So he gets his check. We get to the gym. Coach is still standing at half court, the same spot. And I remember my buddy walking up like yesterday. He's like, you guys got the ball? He goes, no. And he holds up his check all proud. He's like, but coach, we're buying the ball. Don't worry about it. He goes, I don't want your money on the line. I'm like, oh, we had to run a down and back for every dollar of the ball. And he said the ball cost $45. We ran 45 down and backs that morning to start off our 2-27 season of two a day. So it's stuff like that. That was just like absurd, crazy. And then he's like, we got done running. There's no like, hey, shoot free. He's like, all right, see you at 3. Walks out of the gym. Unbelievable.
That's amazing. It's amazing. And yet I think anybody who's played college basketball probably has at least one story of something like that if you look at it from the outside, it just makes no sense. And like when I hear a story like that, I often wonder, I wish you could dive inside his brain and think about what did he think he was accomplishing there to help his team be more successful.
Yeah, Mike, you know what's really bad about that? So here's how we started. Not knocking coach, and if he listens to this, it's fine. I mean, he knows the stories. So we have practice at 3 o'clock. And again, we have like some crappy NAIA players in the gym. Like they can't catch, they can't dribble. So the first drill we do, we have to do 3-man weave, up and down. Ball can't hit the floor, can't drop it, can't go through, the whole deal. And we have to make 30 in a row. Do you know how long, like, it was just the worst possible situation. Dudes are dropping it. The ball's falling out of bounds. So, like, that's how we started a 2-27 season. Now, as a coach, you look back and like, what were we doing? What was he doing? It's just
what was the
scary.
Purpose?
Yeah,
exactly.
For sure.
What was the purpose? Yeah, that's amazing. So my story doesn't have as good of a beginning to it as yours, but it does involve some crazy amounts of running. So I can't even remember the circumstances of the why behind this, but we had to run. We were split up into bigs and guards, and we had to run a suicide. Bigs had to run it in 32. Guards had to run it in 28.
Jeez.
And every time both groups had to make it. So if every player had to make that time or it didn't count. So you would get 3 points if both the bigs and the guards made it on, one particular suicide. You get 3 points. We ran until we got 75 points. And after the first maybe 1 or 2, the bigs just stopped running. You know what I mean? Like they ran and they would get it in like 37 or 38. So theirs never counted. So basically, the guards had to make it every single time. So we ran at least, I don't even know. We didn't make obviously every single one, but so we probably ran, 30, 35 suicides at 28. For anybody out there who's ever tried to run on a college Division I court, a 28-second suicide,
you're cooking.
That's moving. You're not jogging at any point during that. And I just remember like the amount of guys that were vomiting into trash cans and just keeled over. And you're looking at it, and again, just like your story, you look back on it now and you're like, what, like, is he thinking that we're getting tougher? Is it, you just have no idea like what's going through your head. Like if you really step back and look at that as a coach, you have to say, okay, like I want to hold guys accountable for X, Y, or Z, whatever. But at a certain point, what are you doing?
For sure.
It's interesting.
As you've listened to the Hoopheads podcast, one common topic that continually comes up in our conversations is character. I'm fortunate to be associated with the Positive Coaching Alliance, a national nonprofit movement that provides valuable tools, training, and resources for coaches, athletes, parents, and administrators that is centered around sports and educational psychology and organizational behavior research. PCA combines this research with practical advice from a national advisory board of top pro and college athletes and coaches who utilize PCA principles at the highest levels of competition. Through a partnership with our local Cleveland chapter of the PCA, we are pleased to offer a discount code to allow you, our listeners, to take a PCA online course for just $20. To take advantage of this offer, Visit the store on positivecoach.org and enter the discount code HoopHeads20. That's HoopHeads20 with 2 capital H's. Coaches, I hope you'll take advantage of this great offer from the Positive Coaching Alliance and help us continue to grow the game.
As you're going through your college career, obviously I know that from just looking at your bio that you majored and wanted to become a phys ed teacher. So I'm assuming at some point that you had coaching in the back of your head. Did you always know that you wanted to coach as you were growing up, or was it something that you started to think about when you got to college? Was it something that, hey, you just wanted to teach and later you decided coaching was where you wanted to be? When did coaching start to enter your mind?
Yeah, I actually coached a little bit while I was in college. I'd come back when I was training in the summer back home in Arizona while I was in college. I'd help out with some AAU teams and different club teams and academies back then. And some of my greatest mentors and some of the people in my life, were always coaches, and just loved being in a gym, loved being around the game, and, figured I wasn't, smart enough to do anything else, or maybe couldn't work hard enough to do anything else, so figured I better stick with basketball. And it was just something I always planned on doing, and again, my coaching path was a little bit unique as well. I coached junior high teams in the summer. I've coached high school, I've coached college, high major to low major Division I, coached a year with Oklahoma City Thunder with their G League team, so I've kind of done it every level. And just, going back through it again, just like getting recruited out of college, thinking about it, I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get out of college. I'm going to go coach high school, probably win a state championship or two. And then, probably someone will hire me to be a college assistant, which it never works that way, and I'm also not going to go straight from college to coaching a high school team, which I had no clue what I was doing. So when I got out of college, I actually, I coached JV for 2 years, in high school, and I was the assistant varsity coach for a couple guys, and then went on to college. But again, just, wasn't too aware of the process and wasn't too, engaged in how to move up to the college ranks and all that. And so the plan I had leaving college as a student didn't really, work the way I thought it would. But, it was great to be able to say and be able to coach at every level coming through the ranks.
When you first started coaching, even when you were in college, what was it about coaching that you liked? Was it something specific that you're like, hey, I love this piece of coaching, I love this part of it, this is what really fires me up? Or was it more just coaching was a way to stay with a game that you loved? Which way would you describe it?
You know what? That's a great question. I describe it as more, just the opportunity to compete. Like I just, I think I'm a competitor at heart, and the fact that you could take some troops out there, some guys out there, and maybe be the underdog a little bit, especially, when I coached at Buckeye High School, we weren't, very talented, didn't have a lot of players, but you could go out there and fight somebody and, not literally, but,
Right,
fight somebody, scratch and claw, maybe upset a couple people, like just the thrill of that, the competitive nature that fuels and that fulfills was just really, really big for me coaching basketball.
So what did you learn from those first experiences coaching at the high school level that still apply to what you do now and what you've done over the course of your career since then?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, that's an easy question for me because I think about it all the time. And it's one of the things that, someone I really, really admire a lot, Sam Presti with the Thunder, that he complimented me on, when he hired me, but just being a great teacher. And whether, I taught PE and then I would coach in high school, JV assistant varsity coach. Like you really have to just be organized, be thought out, but be able to teach well, because you got different personalities, different levels of intelligence, especially at high school, you're not recruiting anybody. But just to be able to be a good teacher of what you're trying to get done, whether that's character traits, basketball skills, or team concepts, I think I was lucky to have to have great classroom management skills. I was lucky to have a JV team with, 12, 13 kids on it where you have to really teach and instruct, and you don't really have a full-time assistant or anything like that. And that stuck with me. And I think that's, one of the separators that helps me even today with, some of the player development stuff I do.
So what in your mind, obviously we know that there's a connection. Jason and I are both teachers and coaches, and so we can relate to your journey from that standpoint for sure. In your mind, what do you think makes a good teacher out on the basketball court? What are the things that you have to do to connect with players to be able to teach them the skill or the concept or the play or whatever it is, depending on what level and how, what it is exactly that you're doing? what do you think are the keys to being a good teacher of the game of basketball?
To be a good teacher, number one, I think and this is just based on my experience and my opinions. Number one is just really, really knowing your content, really, really knowing your subject, whatever that may be. If you're out there and you're having to constantly look at your notes or go back to stuff, and you're thinking and you're thinking about what you're thinking, you're probably not going to be, a very good teacher that way. And then, the second thing, just being a communicator and to be a great communicator, I think you gotta have great confidence. And, one lesson I learned from my mom growing up, she would always tell me, and, I admire the heck out of her. She single mom for a long time, had to work 3 different jobs, and she didn't know anything about sports. She still doesn't know anything to this day. She doesn't quite get what I do, sometimes with some of the players, she doesn't get that, some of these guys are a really, really big deal. But, she would just always tell me hey, sometimes you got to fake it till you make it. Or she's like, just walk in there and act like you own it. She would just always tell me, own the place. And so to be a good teacher, whatever environment I walk in now, or even back then, I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to at least act like I own the place and act like I know what I'm doing, know my content. And I think because of that, you could really get others to believe, get others to buy in, get others to listen to you, kind of command a room, command a presence, and things like that. It's simple to do, but sometimes it's complex in nature. Or, like I said, going back to that word, that confidence word, it's hard to do for some people.
It absolutely is. I think that there's a lot to be said for those two things that you just mentioned. One being preparation, so making sure that you understand what you're trying to teach and how you're going to teach it. I think that's key. And then being able to communicate what it is that you know. And a lot of times you'll see someone, and I think you can speak to this as, maybe in your short time in education. I've certainly seen it in the education field, and we've all, I'm sure, seen it on the basketball court. If you've been in a AAU tournament, you've seen all different kinds of coaches, some of whom can teach the game and others who you might not want near any of your players or your own children. And I think it comes down to that you sometimes will see people who maybe have a tremendous knowledge of the game of basketball. Maybe they were really good players. Maybe they're somebody who studies a lot of film, or maybe somebody who really does know a lot. But then when they try to communicate that to a kid, maybe they're teaching a 6th grader something that is a concept that should be taught to a high school varsity player, or vice versa. And I think you have to, when you see someone who's a talented, and I'm going to use the word teacher instead of coach, when you see someone who's a talented teacher, you see someone who is able to connect with the people that they're teaching in such a way that they communicate it. And you mentioned a different learning style. Everybody has a different way of learning. And I think as a good teacher, you recognize that, and you're able to say, okay, I know as I get to know this player, now I know that I have to attack this in this particular way. And maybe with another player, it's completely different. And I think that there are some people who, I don't want to say it's a talent, because I do think it can be developed, but I think there are some people who are natural teachers, and they just can walk out onto a court or into a classroom, and if they have a general rudimentary knowledge of what they're trying to teach, to your point, they can sell themselves and they can sell what they're communicating. And there are other people who might have way more knowledge, but just don't have any idea of how to impart that to the players that they're working with. And I think that's something that, it sounds like you've been able to do very, very well in your career, is be prepared and then also be able to communicate it to your players.
Yeah. Mike, one question I get a lot now, especially having coached the Division I level, leaving there to, do player development now with obviously some of the best players in the world at times. But one question I always get is like, well, what do you do to get better? What are you studying to get better? Almost time and time again. I'll watch a ton of film or go to clinics, get the X's and O's and developmental stuff and different concepts. But so much of what I, try to study, learn is just reading about leadership, communication, how people learn differently. Like those are truly the separators today. Millennials, everyone talks about how they learn, their attention span. One of my mentors, I talk about him all the time, Rod Olson, but he always talks about coaching the 21st century athlete. I work on studying that stuff and reading about that stuff more than any other topic or any other area in the game of basketball, just because that's so important on how to get your plan across, like you said, how to connect with others. Like, obviously great connectors are always great communicators most of the time, but to me, that's the separator in today's game. That's kind of the secret sauce. If you want to take someone from good to great or great to elite, it's along those lines. You just threw out 4 or 5 things, but knowing how to do all 4 of those 5 things at a high level and understanding others at a high level because of it.
I think what I hear you saying, and I think this is 100% true, is one, there's a baseline level of knowledge that you have to have that's non-negotiable. So if you're going to coach at the college level, the high school level, you're going to work with NBA players, whatever it is, there's a baseline set of knowledge that you have to have, and without it, you just can't be credible. So that's number one. But then I think number 2, what I hear you saying is what separates the people who are truly great at what they do is they have that base level of knowledge, and then they add on these other pieces, which is the ability to communicate it, the ability to teach it, the ability to explain it in different ways, the ability to adjust based on who the player is or who the student is if we're talking about a teacher.
Yep.
And I think that's really something that makes a huge difference. So I heard you mention that you like to study those, I'm going to use the word intangible things, the communication, the leadership piece of it. So is there a book or 2 that you've read recently that you could recommend to somebody out there, a coach that you like that has had a particular impact on you? Is there something that you've been reading or are reading that you recommend?
Yeah, I read all the time, so that's kind of a tough question, and I usually just repeat the one that I most recently read. But,
Understood.
But
I'm with you.
But to be pretty transparent, and be authentic, most of the time, like I was at a big conference with a professional baseball team the other day. They bring out they bring their staff, management, coaches, and then they also bring out other skill instructors they think they could learn from and share ideas. And it's all about how to make players better, how to get them to retain skills better, how to just grow and, develop others. And, the first question they started the conference off of was with, what's a big mistake you made in coaching? Like what? And so many coaches had similar ones. And my biggest mistake and my biggest regrets in coaching are handling certain individuals and certain situations communication-wise or standard-wise the wrong way, where sometimes, I held someone accountable so much or I pushed them so much, it ends up, damaging our relationship. And I'm not afraid to admit that now. I'm still trying to grow in that at times, but, I have some regrets from when I was a younger coach or, going up through the ranks when it was all about results and winning and, push them and now looking at it, a different way, like, man, I could have handled, a lot of stuff differently. One of the books that really helped me though, just, in the last couple years, I actually just told a guy about it tonight, but Bob Goff's book, Everybody Always. And it's called, what's the part of it? I'm trying to think. Oh, it just says, Loving Difficult People in a World Full of Setbacks. And his book just goes through, all these examples of difficult people, how we struggle with them, how, we could lead them better, how we could communicate with them better. And I was like, man, if I could have, read this 8 years ago, I'd probably have a lot more friends and a lot more players would probably still like me. But, but Bob Goff, and even just his podcast, a lot of stuff he's done, it's really, really stood out to me. Like, one phrase he has, and I think it's in his book too, and he says, don't just tell people who they are, tell them who they're becoming. And it was just like a punch in the face to me, because so many times you're like, oh, you're soft, you don't work hard enough, you're there. Like, tell them who they're becoming. And, that stuck with me a ton. And it's helped a lot, obviously, with player and coach relationships.
So would you say, and I already know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Would you say that from the time you were a young coach to where you are now, that particular aspect of coaching is the area that you've had the most growth in?
I do think so. But what, Mike, and I really care about helping others get better. Younger coaches call me all the time. Players, obviously I work with all the time. But I think the true test of that is, working with guys for several years. So I'd love to say the answer is yes to that. But I'd rather, like, you ask some of the guys I work with. You know what I mean? And sometimes that's been a big indicator of success for me. A guy I worked with in Oklahoma City who's now an assistant with the Knicks. He brought one of the Knicks players out to Phoenix this summer. We trained him together, and he was just like, man, he's like, you are so different. And that was just 3 years ago. And I'm
Right.
like, what do you mean? He's like, you're not all red and pissed off all the time. And so, I'm trying to grow. I think we're all a work in progress. I'm trying to grow and get better at those things. But I had one guy call me, and I think this is powerful. It's one of the best questions I've ever heard. All these young guys write me on Twitter, and I hope I'm not sounding old. I'm a younger guy still. But he was like, he just wanted to pick my brain, want to know how to get into coaching, how to do different things. And he had one of the best questions anyone ever asked. He said, what is something that you used to think was so true, or you had to live by, or you had to do as a coach when you first started out, that now maybe you don't think is that important, or you feel differently about? And I was like, wow, that's a big time
That's
question.
a good question.
It was a great question. Yeah. And I was just like, man, that's maybe one of the best questions. And so, just some of those things standard wise, and how certain guys had to carry themselves or show up, and not being patient enough with players, was kind of my answer. But looking back on it, I was like, God, you could have probably got a lot more results, and, a lot more wins if you could be a little bit more patient with guys at times.
Yeah, and it's a challenge. I think especially as a young coach, you tend to fall back on two things. You tend to fall back on your own personality as a player. And then number two, I think you fall back on the coaches that coached you.
Yeah.
And based on your college coach story, gives you some idea of maybe the experience, that you had in college. And I've told this story before on the podcast, but my first time coaching, I was coaching a JV team, and it was just me and 12 kids. And I knew what my high school coach did, and I knew what my college coach did, and I was a good player. So I thought that qualified me to be a coach. So my entire practice plan, everything I did, was based off two coaches that I played for. And at that time, I wasn't studying anything. I wasn't, watching film of other. I was just going based on what my own knowledge was. And I think now you look back on it and you're like, wow, how bad was I back then, and how much room for growth did I have? And I think, just from hearing you talk tonight, I think, you're the same way. I think you'd probably say, if we did this interview when you were 22, you would have probably said, I know a ton, I know everything. I know I would have said that. Yeah. And yet, now I'm almost 50 and I say, I don't know anything. Yeah. There's so much out there for me to learn, for me to get better at whatever it is I'm doing, whether it's coaching or whether it's doing a podcast or whatever it is, teaching. If you'd asked the younger me, I'd have said, yeah, I'm pretty good at all that stuff. And you ask me now and I'm like, geez, I got so much work to do to try to get where I want to go and be where I want to be. And, I think that's something that we all, as we get older, I think that's how you tend to reflect and look and grow and get better. So let's jump back so we don't shortchange sort of your journey. So explain how you made the jump from high school coaching to college coaching. Tell us how that came to pass.
Yeah, that was a little different. I don't, share my story with a lot of people, and, I'm not trying to make it necessarily about me, but I do think I have everyone says kind of find your burden or your passion in life. Things you have a burden, that'll bug you, that you want to do something about, or find your passion, things you're on fire for every day. And one thing, I'm on fire for a lot of is helping younger coaches. I've helped several guys get jobs, proud of them. It's not like it's my coaching tree, but, been able to help them, move up, move on, or, be able to mentor them a little bit. And, my story, I like to share it for the fact of like people realizing maybe what you have to do to make it. When I left high school coaching, I kind of had two job offers. One at a school where I could have maybe got like 10, 12 grand as a video coordinator, and wasn't sure if the coach was going to be around that long. And then there was another school, Weber State, where they had like kind of a real position, director of ops, real full position, and you're on staff. You're going to get your picture on the website probably and all that, but you didn't get paid a dime. And so I had saved up some money. I knew I was kind of maybe going to have to be a GA or do something, kind of tough, but I didn't expect to make, nothing. But it was a winning program. They had just won the conference championship. Randy Ray, the head coach, he's still the head coach there. He's the all-time winningest coach in the Big Sky. He was a great guy. They were great people, and something just told me like, hey, go up there and, figure it out.
Right.
So I became the director of basketball ops at Weber State, and for 2 years I actually had to work for free. I didn't get paid a dime through the school. I think my second year they maybe got me like $2,000 somehow, like literally $2,000. And so, my first year I had some money saved up. I had a roommate. He was an assistant on the women's staff. Literally, eating peanut butter and jellies in the office all the time for lunch, didn't have anything. And so I'd work at Weber State to get my foot in the door, just to be at the Division I level, because it was just my passion. I wanted to get in, wanted to do it so bad, felt on fire to be there. And I'd work at Weber State from about 8:30 in the morning, get done about 5, if open gym was over or anything in the fall or the summer. And then I'd actually go work the night shift at Costco. So me and 2 other dudes back there, we'd stock the laundry soap. My buddy who's an assistant at NAU, called me the other day. He's like, man, I can't believe like how far we've come. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, you used to call me and you're like, I hate my job. And I go, well, why'd I hate it? He goes, because you used to have to wear your hoodie and these gloves, and you said you always had to stock the chicken nuggets in the deep freezer. And it was just brutal. And then you didn't get a lunch break because it was part-time, so I'd run out, you get a 20-minute break maybe, so I'd eat like a hot dog or pizza, at Costco for like the $1.50, whatever it is. And so that was just killing me for a while. I had to make money, had to pay the bills, and eventually I had to quit that. And so at night, then I would referee men's league games like 3 nights a week. And I think I'm this big-time Division I college coach, ops guy. None of these people know who I am. They could care less. They're like 250-pound fat guys running around. I'm teeing them up, but I'm making $15 a game. And so I had to do all of that to really get my foot in the door and, to kind of survive at the Division I level. And, again, I was ops guy, but that was manager, GA, video coordinator, all of those types of things just to, be part of the program. And luckily I worked for one of the best leaders, one of the best culture guys ever, Randy Ray. I mean, he's won so many games. He's had NBA players there, obviously, but he really taught me what it meant to be a coach, how to be professional, how to treat people, how to lead, how to develop a culture, and wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. He took care of me and promoted me. The third year, I think, they got me a little bit of money. Then he made me, the full-time assistant, and I wouldn't be where I am today, if he didn't give me a chance and take care of me.
That is the glamorous life of a college basketball coach, if I've ever heard it, Phil.
People don't know it. One of my friends always tells me, he's like, hey, everything that glitters isn't gold. You see these coaches with suits on and they're on TV, and granted, I'm blessed. I'm extremely humbled by some of the success and people, I've been around, and, got paid pretty well at a couple stops, once your career got going. But man, going back, like they think you're big time and you're cool because you're on TV and wearing a suit, and they have no idea. I'm, working the night shift at Costco, eating peanut butter and jellies, getting cussed out by a fat guy, and doing, whatever I can, just to make it and just to survive.
Yeah, it's so true. I think that the average public, college basketball fan has no idea when they look down the bench and they see the things that guys are doing. And I had the opportunity this summer to go down and be at the Jay Billis Skills Academy and part of their coaches development program, and the number of young guys who were either GAs or director of ops, or there was a couple high school guys who were looking to move into college, and you hear their stories, and you just hear stories that are just like the ones you just told, of guys who are, they just want to get in, they just want to get their foot in the door, they just want to make it, and they're earning $1,000 or they're earning $0, or they're living with 4 other guys in somebody's basement, and they love basketball and they love coaching so much that they are willing to do just about anything to get in and get their career started. And the average person just has no idea of what it takes. They see John Calipari on TV, they see Mike Krzyzewski on TV, and they think that is the typical route for a college basketball coach. And they have no idea the number of guys who are, toiling away at these, again, even at the Division I level, and I'm going to say the lower positions on a staff.
Absolutely.
It's incredible the dedication that it takes to be able to rise up to have any kind of success as a college basketball coach. Takes just a tremendous amount of time and effort and dedication, and frankly, love for the game of basketball, which is something that I think we can all relate to, but it's tough, and your story illustrates that really well.
For sure. Yeah, I completely agree. One thing, especially like you mentioned, all these young coaches today, trying to encourage them and, for them to figure out their path and journey. I just tell them, like, and it's from one of my favorite movies all time, but The Pursuit of Happiness, with Will Smith, where that guy has to figure it out with his son. They're sleeping in a subway, has to sell a light bulb just to, pay rent or get a meal. I'm just some of these guys who, and I'm not trying to, get on my soapbox here, but they've been at the high levels as a manager or whatever. They think a job's just going to be handed to them. Like, God, it gets pretty frustrating. Where then other guys, it's like, hey, you want something, like Will Smith says in that movie, go get it. You know what I mean? Just figure it out, sleep on the floor, make $1,000, whatever. Because I truly believe, and granted, I guess my story, proves it could work. It might not work for everybody. But, if you want something bad enough, you could figure out how to do it. You might have to sacrifice. You might have to be poor for a while. But then, if you could get the foundation laid, you're going to be okay.
And I think the other story that relates here, and we were fortunate enough, and I know you know Coach Showalter, but when we had him on, one of the things that he said that still sticks with me is that the advice that he gives the young coaches is, wherever you are, it doesn't matter what position you're in, it doesn't matter what camp you're at, it doesn't matter what age kid you're working with, you're never going to get your next opportunity if you're not doing your best at the opportunity where you are. And I thought that was something that rang so true for me, because I think it's easy sometimes when you have these dreams of being at whatever level, the next level, 2 levels up, you want to coach in the NBA, whatever. And you're like, oh, I'm only here with this, I'm working with fifth graders, and then you're not putting your best effort in, and people notice that. And conversely, when you're the guy or you're the girl that's putting in full effort with every single player that you work with, every single team you work with, you're coaching an intramural team, that's what people notice. And that's also how you learn. When you're putting your best effort into something, that's how you learn and get better. And I think any young coach who's out there listening, if you want to continue to move up the ladder, then the rung that you're on right now is the rung that you got to focus on and be your absolute best. And I think that was a great piece of advice that Coach Showalter shared with us and shared with our audience for sure.
Yeah, Show's a legend. He hit that one on the head for sure. He's one of the best.
No question. All right, so after Weber State, then what?
Went to so a little bit of, I guess, looking back on it now, is kind of finding myself as a coach, not so much as a person. Again, unique story. I spoke at a clinic. Well, I didn't know it was going to be my last year, but I spoke at a clinic the summer before my last year at Weber State, just kind of thrown out there in front of some guys in Florida. And unbeknownst to me, Sam Presti from the Thunder was about, 3 rows back. There's probably only 40, 50 coaches. But he came up to me, introduced himself, said he really liked what I talked about player development-wise. We kind of connected. And then a year later, they happened to move their G League team to Oklahoma City. And he offered me a position to be an assistant with their G League team, and got to do a lot of development with the rookies and the young guys, and spend the first few months, working with the big club, the Thunder there, and got there and, kind of had to figure some stuff out. I still had some college teams kind of calling me and trying to hire me and whatnot. And so from there, and, a lot of people get, worried or, don't want to tell their story all the time, but I took 3 jobs in 3 years trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And luckily, I'm young, I'm single, I don't have a family. So I went to the Thunder, worked there for about 9 months, took a college job after that, went to the University of Nebraska, loved it, worked for Tim Miles there. We had a pretty good team, probably could have made the tournament if a guy didn't get hurt, one of our best players, and, didn't expect, went to the Thunder, signed a 2-year contract, didn't expect to leave, end up leaving, because you think you love college basketball and you want to be at that level, and didn't really like the G League. So then go to Nebraska, no intentions to leave, whatsoever. Great job, great pay, great level, great coaches. And then all of a sudden one of my best friends and coaches calls me from Boise State, and he's like, hey, we could be in the Sweet 16. We could do this. We just need you. You could help us, blah, blah, blah. So I leave Nebraska 9 months later after that, go to Boise State. And it's actually Jeff Linder, who's the head coach at Northern Colorado. Tremendous coach, really, really good one. Convinces me to take that job, begs me to take a huge pay cut to go there. And then 2 weeks onto the job, he leaves Boise State to take the head coaching job at Northern Colorado. And something, I guess this is kind of cool, maybe for the podcast, just about the journey. So, and then I was at Boise State for 2 years, and then, started doing this and with player development with NBA guys. But one thing that's kind of cool about that journey, how you get connected with guys and, successful things happen and great things happen. I was with Jeff Linder my first year at Weber State, and he was an absolute jerk to me. Like, he's the guy, like the senior who has to kind of initiate the freshman a little bit. You got to earn his trust as a coach, all that. And until you prove your worth, that he's not going to give you the time of day. But Jeff Linder's at Weber State. He leaves after year one. But year two, while he was there, my year one, he left. Year two, when he was there, he recruited this kid from Oakland named Damian Lillard. So he recruits him, and then he leaves, so he doesn't get to coach him. I stay there. I develop a relationship with Dame, work him out, kind of the rest is history. Everyone knows, how that's gone. And Dame becomes the number 6 pick from Weber State, get to train him, coach him, all that stuff. Pretty unique story. And, Linder's like, you should be thanking me for, recruiting Lillard for you and helping make your career. What's crazy, I go to Boise State. He has a kid there he recruited. He had coached him for 2 years. Like I said, he leaves 2 weeks onto the job, and people don't know this. And Linder's a heck of an evaluator, obviously. And I always give him crap. I'm like, well, it's a good thing you're a good evaluator, because obviously I'm a way better coach, because I'm the one who helps develop these guys.
That's right. You just bring the talent in, then it's up to you to develop it, right?
Yeah, and I'm obviously being, sarcastic with that.
For sure.
But so there's this kid there. He's like, well, you could coach Hutchison. You could coach Hutchison. I'm not coaching. You could coach it. Linder leaves, 2 weeks later, and I ended up coaching this kid, Chandler Hutchison, who wasn't very good, stuck with him, developed him, helped him out, and he ends up being a first-round pick for the Chicago Bulls. So, and then someone had called and said, like, you're one of probably the only assistants that's been at 2 different mid-major schools that has had 2 different first-rounders. And without Jeff Linder, that would have been possible. So even though you do bounce around sometimes somewheres, like, you never know what's going to happen. You never know who you're going to work with or work for, or what players you're going to get to work with, and could end up being a pretty special deal sometimes.
The Head Start Basketball Holiday Camp for boys and girls in grades 1 through 6 will be held on December 26th and 27th. Join us for 2 fun days of basketball fundamentals, contests, and small-sided games. You can find more information or get registered at headstartbasketball.com. What did you like about being a college coach? What was the best part of coaching in college? And then to go along with that, what then prompted you to say, hey, I want to leave the college coaching profession and I want to work on this full-time player development stuff? So kind of give us the positive of college coaching, and then maybe give us the reason why you left and what you love about what you're doing now.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm actually really, really glad you asked, because I get that a lot, and sometimes maybe it's hard to articulate, but I had a love for college basketball. Like, I had a love for the game, being a player. My mentor, Russ Pennell, was a college basketball assistant for a long time. He's a head coach at Central Arkansas now. Like, I wanted to be one of those guys. Like, Russ was a guy I looked up to, like, man, I want to be him someday. I want to help coach a team. I want to recruit some great players to help a head coach win a championship. When I was at Weber State, we won 3. I was there for 7 years. We won 3 championships in 7 years when I was part of the staff. It was an unbelievable experience. All that stuff was just so great about team, connection, trying to win, trying to be the underdog. And I just think the last few years of my career, like Boise was a great experience. Nebraska was a great experience, but, and I'm not trying to be negative here, but the college game just started to change so much. And I'm going to be really candid and really honest here. The people you had to deal with to recruit, the kids we were recruiting, whether they're good kids or good families or not, just all the BS that surrounded that wasn't enough of a trade-off anymore for all the winning, all the competitive nature, all the relationships, all the championships. Like, I was just absolutely sick of it. And I think I found out, a lot about myself to be able to go through and say, like, hey, why am I doing this? Why am I coaching? There was just so much self-promotion. I was 35 years old, an associate head coach at Boise State. Everyone's like, man, you're going to be a great head coach. You're going to get interviews. You're moving up, moving on. And I just completely walked away from it. People thought I was nuts, but deep down I wasn't happy. It didn't feel like I was making a big enough impact, or the sacrifices or the investment we were pouring into people, it just didn't feel right anymore. Like for instance, sometimes you'll go eat with a recruit or his parents or an AAU guy who might be on the visit or whatever it may be, and like they don't say thank you.
Right.
They don't appreciate stuff. They're ready to go to the next school, or like the recruiting and the BS of all that stuff. I was just absolutely done with. The FBI stuff just started to leave such a sour taste for, I think, everybody with college basketball, whether you're a coach, a fan, whatever. And I'm not saying anyone's right or wrong or any sides, but there are just too many things going wrong with it. And I just kind of looked in the mirror. I'm like, man, I really want to pour into people. I really want to help others. Like, am I pouring into the right people, the right programs, the right way, and is it for the right reasons? Because so much of it started just becoming about money, status, the next job, the next thing, the next logo on your shirt. And to me, being a guy who's coached at every level, that's a bunch of BS sometimes. Like I always say, like, I tell young coaches, I tell players, like, you need to look behind the logo. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, just because that guy has I was in, the Big Ten for a year with Nebraska, just because that's a Big Ten logo on the shirt, what's behind that? Like, what's that
Right.
dude made of? What does he really know? I've worked with some guys at the NBA level who don't know as much basketball as certain high school coaches I've been around. So just looking behind that logo, looking, further into my future, the impact I wanted to make, it was kind of a no-brainer for me. And I think also kind of the more driven I became and the more focused on elite level players I became, like, just kind of, I'm not saying I went to a higher level training only pros now, because I do work with some college or some high school kids, but like there are certain types of players I function really, really well with, highly driven, highly dedicated, where sometimes in college you got 4 or 5 dudes on that roster where, like, I'm tired of getting on them about their body fat, or I'm tired
Right.
of telling them to go to class. Like, I get to work with the best of the best now at the high school level, at the college level, and the professional level. And Mike, I didn't say the best of the best talent wise. Not just the most talented guy. I get to work with the best of the best standard wise, or character wise, or dedication wise. And that's what I'm in this for. And I always tell people, and I'm not trying to give you a long winded answer here. And I just told the player, NBA player, went to lunch with him today. And he's just like, man, this training stuff, like, do you ever think you get a bad rap about it? Or do you ever think people look at you different since, you used to be a coach? And I said, here's the difference between me and whether you call me a trainer, a player development. I'm a coach at heart. I think I'm a coach, but I think some people are really, really trying to build a brand and build a business, where I'm just trying to help people, build people and build careers. That's what I want to get to. If I could help build people and build careers, I'm going to be able to look myself in the mirror and be happy with the results that we get.
I think it's funny that you just mentioned whether you're a coach or a trainer, and the fact that there is, I think, a lot of, I don't even know if discussion is the right word, but I just think it's interesting that there's semantics of,
No
well,
question.
you're working with players, and so you're not a coach. And to me, a coach can be, there's so many different definitions. I just think it's funny that people try to, splice that out, where you're a coach or a trainer, you're a player development guy, you're this and that. I always find that to be interesting. So I want to ask you one question about college, and then let's jump into what you're doing player development wise. So all the things that you mentioned, all the BS that goes along with college basketball and the system, and we talked about it right off the top of the show. Just give me a one word answer. I don't even want to get into details, but do you think, yes or no, do you think that can be fixed? The problems that sort of drove you out of the college game, do you think that can be fixed? Yes or no?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. All right. I do too. I do too. I think it's going to take a lot of effort. To me, I see USA basketball as being a huge key to unlock the positive potential of the youth basketball system here in the United States. I think if we could get USA basketball more involved, which, they're obviously headed down that road, I think we can start to get the whole thing cleaned up and back to really what it's all about, which is what, you talked about, which is character and putting together the right things for kids and helping people to grow, not only as basketball players, but as people.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right. Player development. Talk to me a little bit about what you feel are some of the keys to being a good player development, and I'm going to use the word coach?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it goes back to, and I have a little bit of different approach to it, but I think it goes back to, two things. One, having a relationship with the guys and really believing in them, knowing them, spending time with them, and then two, being able to give them the truth. And what probably most people are struggling with nowadays are, giving guys the truth, whether it's players, coaches, everyone fears, confrontation, and it's not even confrontation sometimes. I think people are fearing communication, but I think the best player development coaches, assuming you have that knowledge base like we've talked about earlier, and you know what you're looking for and you know what you're doing, the best of the best, like they have relationships with these guys, and then number two, they will tell them the truth. And so many people are afraid of that stuff, but that's something I don't live in fear of very often.
I think what I've seen, and not so much maybe from the player development standpoint, although I do think you've mentioned it a couple times, that if you're a player development coach and you're trying to build a business and you're trying to earn your living as being a player development coach, if I'm going to tell a kid and their parents, let's say I'm working with junior high and high school kids, and I'm going to tell a junior high kid or I'm going to tell a high school kid the truth about their game, we all know what potentially can happen. That kid and that parent is going to say, well, we're not working with this guy anymore. We don't want to hear this. We're going to go work with guy X who's going to tell us that, hey, Duke's going to be calling you next week, and hey, you should be playing on this team, and hey, your high school coach is wrong, you're not playing enough minutes. And I think that's one place where people are afraid to tell the truth. And then I think from a high school coach's standpoint, what I see too is when high school coaches tell their players the truth, and we talked about it earlier, what happens to that high school player? I'm not staying here. I'm going to go play. I'm going to go play at the next, school down the road. And so I think that's where the truth becomes very, very dicey. And yet, if you're a player, and I don't care what level player you are, you want somebody to tell you the truth. If you're really a player who wants to get better and wants to improve, like, you want somebody to tell you, hey, you're not very good at this. This is what you have to get better at in order to get where you want to go. And it's never easy to hear criticism. I know I can think back to me being a player and sometimes thinking when my coach would say something to me and get upset, what's he talking about? But if you really care about it, then you go back and you reflect and you say, you know what? He's right. And now I got to decide whether I want to make that difference. And I think the key to that is, and you've said it a few times, is you got to build relationships with guys. And if you don't have relationships, then it's a lot harder to tell somebody the truth if they don't already trust you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And literally, and, it's kind of fitting because I had, hour and a half lunch with a guy today and we talked about this exact stuff, about one of the coaches on his staff. He said, like, they could go at it. He said sometimes he doesn't like hearing the feedback or what he sees, on film. He's like, man, I got to get better. And 10 minutes later, the kid is like, you know what? He's right. And I needed that. And he appreciates him because of it. And, something I think nowadays, and again, this is kind of a lot of the stuff I'm into and studying and reading about. One of the biggest things we have to fight with players, and I do a lot of consulting now for even like high level executives or organizations or teams or different stuff like that. But one of the biggest things like people have to fight, or us as leaders, and again, I don't call myself a trainer. I'm a coach. That's what I've done my whole career, like player development, whatever, like I coach basketball, I coach individuals, I try to make guys better, but we have to get them to fight self-deception. Like so many people, I always just talk about, like, there's just this poison out there in our game today from parents, from social media, from all this stuff, to where these guys are just listening to lies, hearing lies, and even telling lies. And I tweet it sometimes. It was from, the pastor at Life Church in OKC. He's like, some people tell so many lies and they've lied to themselves for so long that they start to believe the lies are the truth because
that's the old George Costanza, right?
I'm not a Seinfeld guy.
If you believe, he used to say, I think the line was, if you believe it, it's not a lie.
Yeah, there you go. But like so many times, trying to help people, accelerate their progress or get further along down the road, like you have to really get them to quit lying to themselves, get them to kind of, get rid of their blind spots, look at things with a sense of reality. And when you get past that, and again, like you said, you got to have trust and relationship to do that. When you get past that, then it's easy to improve their skill level or help fix their shot or get them to rebound more. But that's usually the first step in it.
So how much do you talk with the players' team on an NBA level? So do you go and have conversations with the coaching staff about, hey, here's some things that we see that this player needs? How much of it is conversation with the player? How much of it is you watching film of their game and then figuring out like, hey, you really could work on this, or here's something that somebody else in the league is doing that plays in a similar role as you and they're being really effective with it? Just kind of parse out that for us in terms of how you go about building the player development program for an individual player.
Yeah, that's awesome. One thing, and this is where, man, this is like, an awesome kind of topic here. I know it's player development, but it's going back to what you said. Like, can we fix some of those things in college basketball? And Mike, this is something like I'm extremely passionate about. I'm trying to take on a few projects, to do it now, but it all starts with the coaches. Like so many of these trainers, and I'm going to use the word trainers, they're getting a bad rap now because it's all about them. They want to do it their way. They just see a different vision maybe for that player than the team does. So with me, if I know people on that staff with the NBA, which a lot of them I do just because of, my past experience and whatnot, there definitely is a direct line of communication. But one thing I do, like when I was a coach, if I ever had someone training a kid, I would be, a little concerned maybe, like, what's he telling them? Is it the same message, whatever? But I know this, and literally I told one of my guys this today. I said, if your coach is telling you to do something, you know what you need to do? And he looks at me and he goes, do it. And I go, absolutely. I'm never going to tell you to like shoot a bunch of threes when they're telling you to drive the ball. Because if you want to play and you want to be successful, guess what you got to do? And he looks at me kind of dumbfounded. I go, please your coach. He's your coach. He's in charge. And if you don't like it, then play for someone else. Or if you don't like it, then sit on the bench. But I was a coach. I get those things. So, and a big word I use in player development is alignment. Staff, player, trainer, everyone has to be in line to get that player to be the person you want to be, to get him to, fill that role you want him to fulfill. And again, going back and, I'm a little biased because I do stuff with the USA Junior National Team now, but it starts with the freaking coaches. If we want this stuff fixed at these levels, whether it's AAU, college, or whatever, we have to coach our coaches. There has to be standards. There has to be accountability. There has to be certain things done the right way because, and it goes back to what you said earlier about my career, about your career. We didn't know what we didn't know. We're JV coaches, probably cussing these kids out. Our coaches did this, so we did that. Our coaches did this, so we did that. Like, and this isn't fair. It's not a cop-out. I'm really big on like confronting victims. Like, we're never going to be a victim. But at the end of the day, like, these players don't know any better. These coaches don't know any better. So who are the guys that are going to get out there and show them better and teach them better and hold them accountable to better? And until we start doing that in our game at every level, and again, I've coached junior high, high school, all the way through pro basketball, like until we do that, we have to show them better and teach them better and hold them accountable to better. And if we're not all aligned in that, those things won't get fixed. And I don't care if it's junior high, high school. Like you said, you were working out some fifth graders, I think, today, and I worked out an NBA player today. I don't care. It's the same thing. There are certain standards of excellence and accountability that that we all need to have.
There's no doubt.
Sorry, I get fired up about that stuff because I truly believe in it.
You are 100% right. I think all you have to do is go and step foot into a youth tournament and watch the different styles of coaching and watch the different ways that coaches interact with players and parents and people, and know that there's just a tremendous need for the education of coaches. And I think there's also a tremendous need for the education of parents.
Absolutely.
Which is something that I've stumped for, because ultimately parents end up making a lot of bad decisions for their kids with what programs they go with and what coaches they play for, because they're just not educated on what a positive basketball experience should look like, especially at the youth level. And I think that's a challenge. And I talked about it earlier, and I know you've talked about it and your involvement with USA Basketball. And I really think that that's going to be the linchpin. That's going to be the key. That's going to hopefully continue to work towards elevating the standards for coaching, which is going to ultimately elevate the standards for players, and ultimately is going to elevate the game, which is really, for all of us, I think that's really what it's all about. So,
no question.
Phil, I want to give you a chance before we wrap up here to share your contact information, how people can reach out to you. If they want to have a basketball conversation, just reach out and say thanks for jumping on the podcast. Go ahead and do that now. And if there's any parting shot that you have, something that we didn't talk about that you want to touch on, go ahead and do that, and then I'll jump back in and we'll wrap up the episode.
Absolutely, yeah. And thanks for having me. My one great way is Twitter. A lot of people hit me up on that. It's just my name, @Phil Beckner. I tweet some player development or basketball stuff or quotes quite a bit. You could direct message me on there, or just an email, develop, and then the number 2, compete @gmail.com. So develop with the number 2 and then compete @gmail.com. And, I think the last thing I'd like to share, and I think this is just, again, like, whether it's a trainer, a coach, leader, whatever, something I read really, really good lately, and I share with all my guys, but we want to take the responsibility to get you better. We want to take the responsibility to, develop you without taking any of the credit. And I just think if so many more younger coaches, other people, we all viewed things that way. Like we have a responsibility. There's going to be a standard. There's going to be certain accountabilities we have to develop others. But you know what? It's not our job to take the credit either. We're not doing this for the credit. We're doing it to grow people and impact others. And I think when you do that, the success will find you. When you do that, the job will find you. When you do that, the money will find you. And if we make it about people first and, pouring into others, we're going to end up where we want to end up.
Love that, Phil. It's a great way to wrap up. We can't thank you enough for jumping on and spending an hour and 15 minutes or so, whatever it ended up being tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure to have the conversation. And to everyone out there, we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.